Nice and muggy outside.
It is. So thanks for coming today. So what we're going to do today is basically, this is my sort of cool topics to cover class that are not required, but if we have a lesson to cover them, we're going to do it. So what we're going to do today, basically class will be broken up into 3 parts. The first thing I want to do is play around a little bit with Ajax and ASP.NET. It's really simple to implement, so I want to show you how you can do it. So that'll be part 1. Part 2, Peter, question?
I just have just something I want to share. It was a SQL error for every time you tried to access in Microsoft Visual Studio, you tried to view your database. I figured out how to fix that.
Okay.
There's an SSD that you have to go into the extensions and updates, and then you have to go and find that one and then click update for it. It'll download it and then it'll work properly.
Okay, thank you. Richard, did you have a question?
Yeah, are we gonna do the Ajax thing where the page loads without refreshing?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
That is what we're going to do. So it's really easy to implement with .NET because they have basically a built-in library that we can connect to, and it will do almost everything for us.
So we can like click a thing that'll turn to the next page, but it won't reset your back to the top of the page.
Correct.
I was trying to do that for you.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to do the first part of class. We'll talk about Ajax. The second part of class, what I want to play around with is Web API. So I want to build a very simple .NET API where somebody can query our Contoso database and get data back in JSON format so that they could use it in another application and present that data however they want. So we'll look at doing those 2 things. And then the last thing we'll do, which will be Lab 5, I think we'll probably allocate maybe about the last half hour of class, is compile some, you guys will together compile an exam cheat sheet. We'll break up the topic so everybody can contribute to that. And everybody who's here today will get a full copy of all the notes for you to bring to the final exam. And if you participate, I'll also count that as your Lab 5 mark. Okay? So probably about a half an hour should be enough time for that. We'll leave that for the end of class.
Is the exam practical?
No, the exam is not practical.
Because he's not going to be here.
You know what? My travel schedule changed a little bit. I actually am going to be here, but I'm still going to keep the format as question and answer. Okay, so we have no class next week, so this is your last class. Anything that we have done up till now, including the first 6 weeks of class, is fair game, although there'll probably be more questions on the lessons after reading week, but still anything we did before reading week, I may ask you. Okay, so the exam is open book. There will be lots of questions about code. So for example, I might give you a block of code and say, how would you complete this? Or I might say, what will this block of code result in? Or what's wrong with this block of code and how would you fix it? There'll be lots of questions of that type. Okay, you will be able to use Visual Studio as well, so you are allowed to actually try out the code when you need to.
Where is next Monday?
Next Monday is the August Civic Long Weekend, so there's no class. First Monday of August is always a holiday, so this is your last class. So I will actually be here, but I'm still going to stick with that format, because if I did practical exams in all of my classes, I wouldn't have any time to mark them because I'm leaving at the end of the exam week. So this way, by giving you Blackboard-based exams, you're going to get your marks right away.
Where are you off to again?
India.
Yeah.
Vacation?
No, going for work. Not a vacation. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Ajax. First of all, what is it? What do you know about it? Why would you say that?
Because I didn't know what I was doing. I accidentally implemented it.
Okay, when you accidentally implemented it?
There's a town of Ajax.
Well, why would we implement it? What are some of the reasons to use it? Okay, that's probably the biggest one, right? We can make a request to the server without having to reload our entire page. So that's the biggest benefit. So we get a performance boost. We also can give our users a better experience through it. Any other reasons why we would use it, Josh?
You could keep keep the session open as long as they're on the page?
Yep.
I use it to manipulate XML. Those are files.
Yep, we can. Hayden?
Live updates, like you can keep the page frequent, so you can, like, without having to reload the page all the time, like you said.
Yep, you got it. Okay, where does the name Ajax actually come from? It's actually a bit of a misnomer. Where did that name, what did the name actually come from? Sort of, it's a combination of two technologies. Richard, you mentioned one already.
XML.
Yeah, so the X stands for XML. What about the AJ part? Yeah, the J is JavaScript, and what's the A at the beginning stand for? Right, asynchronous, which means what? Because that's kind of an important, well,
Sorry. Altering.
right, so asynchronous meaning not at the same time, meaning we can go to the server with only part of a page. Normally, our HTTP requests are fully synchronous. Okay, so if we look at the difference, right, so in a normal HTTP request, you know, the browser makes a request to the server, which might hit the database. Let's say we want to, you know, go to our courses page. Show me the list of courses. So we click on courses on a page like this. I'm making an HTTP request to the web server. The web server connects and hits the database, which fetches data back and sends back a full page. It could be the same page you're on, or it could be a different one, but we get the full HTTP in the response. An Ajax request looks like this. Instead of using a regular HTTP request, it uses a specific object called an XML HTTP request, which looks a little bit different. We make that request to the server. We can go to our database, do whatever operation we need to do. But now, instead of getting an entire HTTP response with the headers, we're only getting back basically the data. And that's it. So the rest of our page stays static. So our user gets a better experience. Performance-wise, we can get a big boost from this as well. Okay. So, what are some practical uses? What are some things, where would you see Ajax being used? Okay, yep, so for mobile, where else would you see it used? What other kinds of functions would use Ajax?
I guess updating pages.
Okay, yep. Form inputs could be?
Like a live chat.
Yep, live chat.
Yeah, live streaming of data.
Mm-hmm. Where else might we see it? Where parts of the page might get refreshed without a full refresh.
Cascading navigation.
Cascading navigation or drop downs would be one, right? Pick one drop down and then it automatically filters the second drop down. We don't need to reload the entire page, we just need to reload those sections. So something like this. This is one of the places we're actually going to implement it today. Right on our student page, we've got these drop downs that are cascading. Why would adding Ajax here be a good idea?
So that it doesn't jump to the top of the page when it was selected.
That's right. There's no need to reload all that page, run this query again, repopulate. Plus, the user's got to go back down here now to select. Right? It jumps around. So this is a perfect spot to use Ajax. The only thing that has to change is this area. When we're doing calculations or in the shopping cart, I bet you if we looked at something like Amazon, probably their cart uses Ajax, I would imagine. So let's say I add something to my cart in Amazon. Let's just go in here and add it. So we'll add that to the cart. If I make changes here, so let's say I increase the quantity. Notice not everything changes, only this part changes and this part. It didn't do a full page refresh. You didn't see a flicker up here in the top. So they're changing certain parts of the cart and not others using Ajax. Okay, so anytime we're doing calculations, it would make sense to just update the result of the calculation without necessarily refreshing the page. So lots of uses for it. Now we can write all the code ourselves. but Microsoft basically makes the library available to us. So here's where we'll implement it. We're going to do a few things. We want to implement cascading dropdowns. The other place that we can implement it is, so let's say here, when I click login, rather than doing a full page reload, we could implement Ajax here. So if our login is invalid, we can simply pop up the message here without doing a full page refresh. So what I'm going to do is you can either take your solution from last week, export it as a template, and make a new one. If you do that, keep in mind you broke one of your 2 connection strings last week. You'll want to fix the connection string because we actually want it to be able to log in and see the data this week. I'm just going to work with my lesson 10 solution. It doesn't have the error handling built into this. So you can either take lesson 10's files or take your lab from last week, just fix the connection string, export it as a template, and make a lesson 12 folder. Up to you. So I'm just going to work with my lesson 10 here. I'm going to export this, and then I'll make a lesson 12 solution. I did mark everybody's labs, so everybody should have their marks for lab 4. So if you have no file to work off of, you could grab my lesson 10 file off of GitHub, but pretty much everybody in here looking around, I think I marked pretty much everybody's lab 4, so you may as well just use lab 4.
You uploaded last week's code to lesson 4 on GitHub. Took me like 3 hours to find it yesterday.
And it should be here. I just looked at it this morning.
The lesson 10 we did.
Hang on. Hang on. Bear with me just a sec. Here's 14 days ago.
There's 6 days ago one. It's in lesson 4.
6 days ago.
Yep, no, 2007 lesson 4, 3 days, 7 days ago.
Oh, that's kind of, yeah, you got to ignore that one. This is my testing project. I use this before I give a lesson. Whatever the stuff I want to do in class, I usually do in there to test it out and make sure I've got it working.
Air handling in lesson 10.
It was actually lesson 11 or lab 4. I didn't make a lesson 11 because last week I didn't build it. You guys did it as the lab. So if you submitted lab 4, I suggest you work on that one. If you didn't, then work on lesson 10. Okay, I'm going to work from my lesson 10. So I'm going to make a new lesson 12 project, and I'll base it on my lesson 10 template.
Oh, crap. Did I pull my entire computer up? Oh my gosh, I did. One second. Did you go record?
So just once you have a new solution for today, just get it launched.
Now I have to reboot.
So just make sure that you can log into your application and that your students' courses, departments, pages connect properly to your database. So this is basically where we left off 2 weeks ago. Again, if you didn't do the lab and you don't have lesson 10 working, you can always take my Monday lesson 10 off GitHub and put your own credentials in web.config. So we're going to start by making these drop downs into Ajax enabled. They're already cascading, but we want Ajax functionality here. Now this was already working a few weeks ago, There is one great big gotcha with using Ajax with .NET. And Kyle, you'll probably be able to explain what I mean. I can see from the eye rolling and the grin. Now, when I click one of these options in department, what actually happens right now? What property did we set on the drop-down? What will happen when I choose one of these?
It'll populate titles.
Index change.
Right, what happens, so selected index change happens, what else happens? Right, it performs a postback, right? So the page posts to itself. Kyle, did you want to finish my thought why this can be a challenge with Ajax? Because the postback feature can interfere with Ajax, because Ajax also performs a post. So there's times where if we're doing things on postback, Ajax can mess it up. So we have to be a bit careful with that. Okay. So here we've basically got a synchronous postback. We're going to be changing this into an asynchronous postback. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add a reference to the Ajax library. So there's a library called the Ajax Control Toolkit. This is not actually developed by Microsoft. It's developed by a third party called DevExpress. DevExpress has their own entire suite of .NET controls that you can buy and add. So we're going to use NuGet. So I'll right-click on my project. I'll go to my NuGet packages. And if I search for Ajax, the control toolkit should be the first one that comes up. Actually, it's the second one. Build Ajax applications in web forms using more than 40 controls in the control toolkit. So we want to install that.
What's wrong with the unobtrusive Ajax?
That's a jQuery plugin.
Hey, Rich, what repo is it under? Because I didn't do that free, so I don't have the courses on the student page.
Okay, if you need my files from Git, right here, you want Lesson 10 Monday.
Thank you.
I think the link is in the Lesson 10 folder on Blackboard, but if you just go to my GitHub, you can find it and grab this repo. Just make sure, again, there's the credentials in there twice. We have the 2 connection strings in web.config, so you need to update both of them to use your credentials.
You make the EF thing?
Yeah, because the one called default connection, let me just close. We do need them both because there's 2 connection strings here. This one that we call default connection, that's what ASP.NET Identity uses for logging in. The one we call default connection EF is our own that uses our database first model, and we're using that for all of our CRUD operations for courses, students, and departments. So you need both of those, and both of them have to contain your proper credentials. Okay. Sorry, I never actually installed the control toolkit, so just install the Ajax control toolkit, and you can close NuGet. If web.config is open, that installation will want to add some references to web.config. So if you have it open, Visual Studio asks if you want to reload it, you can just say yes, or yes to all. So DevExpress is the vendor of this. Originally it was made by Microsoft, but DevExpress now handles it. So we just now have this tag Ajax Toolkit as a prefix if we want to use Ajax controls in our pages. So enabling Ajax is really as simple as dragging and dropping a few controls on the page. So let's open up, go into your admin folder. We want to open up the student.aspx page. Now this is all done in our HTML. We don't actually have to make any changes in our C# in order to enable the Ajax. So I want to scroll down here, Actually, sorry, I'm going to do one thing at the top first. If I go to my toolbox, notice there's now an Ajax Extensions tab. We need two things. The first thing is any page that's going to use Ajax requires one and only one script manager tag. What the script manager does is basically allow the toolkit to auto-write the JavaScript for us. Just like the .NET validators auto-write the JavaScript. We can only have one of these per page, but any page that's going to use any Ajax needs one script manager. So we can put it on here. Later we might want to move it to our master page, but we can just put it on the student page for now. So I'm just going to drag a script manager tag. I'll just drag it here right inside my content block. We don't have to do anything else with it. We don't have to set any of the properties. We can leave the default ID as script manager 1. But I'll show you what happens if we try and run Ajax on the page without it. Okay, so we need one and only one per page. So it probably makes sense to put this on the master page. We'll put it here first. We'll get it running, and then we'll try moving it to the master page. So now I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. So here we had our drop downs. So here was our first drop down that then has auto postback and a selected index changed event. So this drop down cascades over to this one. And if we looked at the code, so when our selected index changed event happened, we captured what department the user picked. We queried the database, got the courses for that department only, and then we bound the result to our second dropdown, which gave us this sort of result. Right, if I picked economics. Oops, sorry. I guess I'm running it online, which is fine. So I got those courses. If I pick something else, our page refreshes and we get, so that's that's where we are so far with it. So the control we want to use, if I go back to my toolbox, there's a few different controls. There's an update progress. This gives you like a spinning graphic if we're doing some processing that's going to take a while. This will show the user like a progress. Usually we use some kind of animated GIF for that. That will appear when they start the process and it will automatically disappear when the process is finished running. The control we use the most is an update panel. So that allows us to set which part of the page is going to be modified, which part is affected by the postback. So I'm going to drag an update panel on my page. So I'm going to put it, let's see, I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to put this other update panel so I'm on students. And inside our update panel, there's another nested tag that we need, which is a content template. So this whole thing, the drop down and the validator, go inside. Oops. So what happens here is when there's a postback being done inside the update panel, it's only the things that are inside the panel that are affected by the postback. Everything else on the page just remains static. So let's just build, because we've added the NuGet package, so we need to recompile. Let's see what happens when we do it this way. So I've added the update panel and content template around my department. We'll see where we get so far with this. We didn't set any of the properties. Now, notice there was a, well, sorry, one step at a time. So I'll reload my student page with an existing student ID. So the other thing we need to do, you notice it's still not this list isn't populating, but our page isn't posting back. We're not getting the full. So we're also going to put an update panel around our course dropdown.
So, script manager at the top. Come on. Just one script manager.
I'll just give this an idea of PNL course. I could just drag and drop. So I'll move that second update panel and we'll add a content template section here as well. I'll come back to this triggers in a minute. So we want the second drop down and range validator to go inside. Let's see what happens now.
Do you say run ID to server?
Yep, because it's a server control.
So all you did was put ID and run app.
Yep. So now, notice only things that are inside an update panel are affected by that postback. English. Well, that's pretty easy. Right.
So no code?
All we did, no code. Right? If we want to view the source, let's see what the control toolkit did for us. So it uses that script manager to load some JavaScript. If it can't find the Ajax library, we get that error. And it handles everything. So it initializes the script manager. And it writes the code to do the post back, but do it in an Ajax format.
So you had an update panel and a what? There was three things you had run.
You need an update panel, and then you need a content template inside.
Like what tags or nothing? No tags?
Nothing. You just nested the content template. Does it work for you to get the same result when you try it?
That's your script manager.
Yep. I'll show you what happens also without the script manager. So I didn't change the script manager at all, Connor. I just dragged it from the toolbox. But you've added the control. Did you install the NuGet package?
Yeah.
Let's see if it works.
Interesting.
There was you have to make sure you install the first one on the search Ajax.
Sorry?
The second one didn't work for Ajax, you need to install the first one. I don't know what everyone did.
It was the second one in my list when I searched Ajax, because the first one was jQuery for Ajax.
Well, I installed, on mine when I searched it, it was the first one, it was purple. I don't know. I got both. You got both. Yeah.
Okay.
Just make sure you install whatever ones are Ajax.
I'm going to take out the script manager for a second, and we'll see what happens without it.
So this wouldn't work if you took out the auto postback too, right?
Well, it wouldn't do anything, right? Because the drop-down doesn't fire the event. So it says, in order to use an update panel, you have to have a script manager, and it must appear before any controls that use it. So you can't put the script manager on the bottom. The script manager has to be initialized first. Now, we don't have to put it on the student page. In fact, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to paste it at the top of the master page instead. So I'm going to try it in my master page. Maybe I'll just put it before my main content, I'm going to put the script manager in here.
Sweet. I got it working.
Should work there, and then
Oh,
we
wait.
don't need a script manager on other pages.
I forgot to remove my,
If we put it above where our page content starts,
and we remove the auto postback.
it should still work. No, don't remove the auto post back, or your drop down will not do anything.
Oh,
That property is still necessary to trigger the post back. Okay, so I've just moved my script manager to my master page. We'll try it and make sure it still can work from the master page.
there will be.
So it still works fine.
You just stuck it at the top.
I just put, it doesn't really matter where it goes, it just has to be above this. As long as it's above the main content, because the main content comes from our other pages, those pages contain update panels, they need to see this tag first. So it has to be above.
So just above the form one. Wait, yeah, yeah.
So by default, the way these update panels work is if a postback is triggered inside of one update panel, it automatically affects all the other update panels on the page. Now, we can override that. If we only want it to affect one specific area, this is what the triggers is for. So we can set, I'm not sure where my, oops. Not sure where my IntelliSense has gone. So what the triggers let us do is they let us specify a target panel. So we can say any postback that happens here should only affect an update panel with this particular ID, rather than affecting all of the update panels.
Where exactly did you stick your other manager?
There isn't another one, there's only one.
No, your script manager though. Because I put mine in and then it broke.
I put it on my master page right before my content placeholder.
Okay.
So the implementation of this is really pretty simple to do a basic partial update.
So the triggers,
Pardon?
You were looking for the control names inside triggers.
Yeah.
Control ID and event name.
Right, so if I say control ID equals PNL course, that means a postback here will only update the update panel with that ID.
Can you set multiple control IDs to update? What if you wanted, like,
Yes, you can have multiple triggers.
just copy separated, or would it be, you add another trigger?
Hang on just a second, let me double check the.
so it's like each trigger can update one panel, but you can have multiple triggers? to
Oh,
update
it's,
multiple?
hang on, it's this, wait a second. You have to do it like this. So you have a trigger section. So you can set either an async or a synchronous. So asynchronous postback trigger. So then you set control ID equals, PNL course. And the event name in this case would be that event. If you don't specify a trigger, it will update all the update panels on the page. So let's say we had additional update panels that we didn't want to be affected by this. We only wanted the course to be affected. This trigger would then mean only this drop down, only this area was affected by that event. So Kyle, to come back to your question, yes, then we could just have multiple, we could have as many as we wanted. So let's say we have 5 update panels on the page, and this event should only change 2 of those 5. We would write 2 triggers to specify which 2 panels should be affected by a post back here.
What's the difference between
Good question. I've only used the async postback. I'm not sure the answer to that. Let me just see what happens if we use postback, if we have the same.
Probably just do full page.
It says here they both accept.
So this one doesn't accept event name, only a control ID. I'm not sure that's a fair question. So when you're using Ajax, part of what you have to figure out is what sections of the page should be affected by it. Now, we might only have a single update panel, so we don't use these all that often. It really only comes into play if we have a whole bunch of update panels and we only want to update some and not others. Do we have to worry about using the triggers? So for example, on Amazon, here they have a whole bunch of different dynamic sections, right? They have this section here, they have this section here, and this section here. So if I change something, see if we can see it all. Actually, if I delete. So it changes a number of things in different places. Okay, so the update panels are totally flexible. We can use as many as we need to.
If we needed to do that for like the list of students, say you're deleting it, would you just do the panel around the whole?
Okay, well, let's do that, right? We have a delete. That's a good question, Hayden. So let's say we want to delete. We don't want the full page to update, right? If I hit delete, we only want the grid to update. So right now, if I click delete, so I'll just put this student in another course, put them in trigonometry. Let's say right, I don't want that. We can just put the course, let's try it, create another update panel just around courses. So this just updates the grid. And this is where now we can then go back and use a trigger, because we'll see that's going to affect our drop down. So in here, I'm going to indent courses. I'll indent it too. So try putting another update panel around this and see what happens when you do delete now. So the effect we want is this. I add a student in a course, but now when I want to delete them, we don't want a full page, we just want the grid to refresh only, if I say OK. Right? That's a better experience for the user. It doesn't jump back to the top of the page. We haven't wasted bandwidth refreshing all the other stuff.
When you do that, if you add two, and then you delete one, on the second one, we both deleted the alert to check if you want to delete it. It doesn't work if there's no refresh to reload the script for the delete.
Good point.
All you added was a panel and a content?
That would have fixed the heading.
I just put it.
Sorry?
That would have fixed the problems I had. Just putting it in an update.
Now we also might want to add an update panel here as well. Right? If I go to add, it adds, but it jumps me back to the top. So we should be able to add. So this is where we might want to use a trigger. If we put an update panel here around the add button, when they click add, we only want to update the courses update panel. We don't need. So let's try that. So in our update panel here, I'm going to give this one an ID of PNL grid. Okay. So we'll set a trigger on our add. When the user clicks the add button, that trigger will only update this grid, this update panel. It'll leave the rest of the page static. So that way the page won't jump around. So we'll give this one an ID of PNL grid. And I'm going to add this one into an update panel as well. So we'll just. But this time we're going to use a trigger. Yes, it's still, because there's still content inside it, so the button has to go inside a content template. So we'll close our panel down below. So our button still has to go inside of a content template. Otherwise, we get an error and it won't show up. So it will work like this, but we can also use a trigger. So we'll use an asynchronous postback trigger. So our control is PNL grid. That's the target of this postback. We're only updating that update panel. The other update panels, we don't need to refresh those. And the event name is btn add click. So when this event happens inside of this update panel, it's only updating this update panel here, and not all of them. So try that, and now try adding a student into a new course. You got an error?
Yeah, it says something like that.
Well, we'll try it. Let's see. We may have to tweak it. Oh, okay, maybe it's not the grid I have to reference. Maybe it's this one, GRD. Maybe it's our ASP grid view. I'm going to try that. Let's see what accepts that.
What did you call the asynchronous post back trigger for panel course?
Hang on just a minute. It's not quite right.
Oh, you didn't have one. So do you currently only have 2 triggers on the page?
I only have one trigger, but I haven't done it right. I need to think for a minute.
What about the other one you've had for panel course department?
whoops, it's event name. We have to play with it for a few minutes, for a minute. Let's see. It didn't, that's right, it did work, but it didn't target the grid.
If you were to refresh the page, it do you have to do a postback trigger instead of a...
Actually, you know what? This may be in the wrong place. This may have to go. I'm going to try this in the other panel. That this grid is updated conditionally. Yeah, that would make sense. But the trigger is the click of the add button. Mind you, that will probably break our delete. I think this will work, but I probably ultimately don't want it. I'm just going to try it out. So now I add English. Yeah. Sorry, I had the trigger in the wrong place. So the trigger is attached to the update panel. That's receiving the event, in effect.
But now that'll intercept the delete.
Yes, but that should break the delete. Because I'm not actually.
You just have to add another trigger.
Yes, if we add another trigger, that's right. So the control ID here is our grid. And in this case, the event name is row deleting. So our grid is now updated by those two triggers, an add or a delete. But when the drop downs are being toggled, this update mode equals conditional means ignore any other asynchronous postbacks. Only refresh the grid on those two events. I think that will give us the result that we want. And I had to add this update mode equals conditional when it's not going to be the target of all Ajax postbacks, but only for specific triggers.
Oh, whoops. Crap.
Did that work?
Yep.
I'll try one more time. I will put the code back up. I just want to test it. So if I delete, so there's our Ajax. If I add a course back, the grid is the target of those two events. Yet if I do this, right, nothing happens in the grid because the mode is conditional, and this selected index changed event, it does not trigger an update in the grid. So without the triggers, every update panel is affected by every asynchronous postback. The triggers let us define exactly which events should trigger postbacks in what other areas.
Your confirmation.
The confirmation we would have to, I'm going to leave that for now, but you're right, because the confirmation only gets attached
On the lower page.
So how many triggers?
when the document's ready. This doesn't run on an asynchronous postback.
So you'd have to like trigger that, I think.
So we'd probably have to then trigger this script through those asynchronous methods.
So how
like add or
How
delete.
many triggers do you have right now?
2. There are 2 triggers.
Boxes.
The grid is a target of these 2 events, but not the other async. So there's 3 asynchronous postbacks. When the user clicks a department, when the user clicks the add button, or the user clicks delete button. We're making the grid the target of the add and the delete. It is not a target of this event. It doesn't need to be. This event doesn't affect the grid, so the grid can just stay static.
Where's your third trigger then?
We don't have a third trigger.
You said you had 3 async.
No, I said there are 3 asynchronous postbacks. 2 of them affect the grid. So we need a trigger for each of the ones that affect the grid.
So you removed the other 2 triggers?
There are no other triggers. The only triggers, so here's an update panel, there is no trigger. Here's an update panel, there's no trigger. Here's an update panel, there's no trigger.
Okay.
The 2 triggers are part of the grid's update panel. Okay. So there are other things we can do, like I said, with the progress bar. This is probably the most common use of Ajax for being able to partially update our page. It saves bandwidth, so we're not reloading things that don't need to be reloaded. It increases speed, it gives the user a better experience. It keeps them on the same section of the page we want them to see.
If I was, so, never mind, I kind of know actually so far, but.
Okay. So I'm not going to take up class time. I'll also figure out how we would re-invoke that JavaScript, right? Because it is not getting re-invoked on the partial postback. We're losing that.
That's never was though.
So it should be called again. Any other questions about Ajax? It is pretty easy. Drag them on. Drag the script manager on, drag the update panels, figure out the logic of how you want the update panels to work. What should get updated, what should get static, or what should get updated by which event. You have full control over it just by setting the properties. We didn't touch the C#. We've done absolutely nothing here other than add the NuGet package to the project. That's it. So that's the only thing you need to do outside of the ASPX.
Is that all there is to do this on the ASPX?
Basically, yep.
Is there more we could do? Not really much else.
Not really. Okay. So we're going to leave that. And I want to talk a little bit about Web API. We don't have tons of time to get into it. If we have a quick look at the official site, there's lots of resources here. What do you guys know about APIs? Who's worked with them at all on co-op? Have you done any work at all? Anybody built an API of any kind, or had to build code that interfaced with an API that consumed an API built by somebody else? Josh?
Yeah.
What did you have to do?
It was with like a ticket tracking application.
Okay.
So I had to download their API kind of library.
Yep.
And then I just basically referenced that and I
Okay. So what type of what were you using to build the application? What language?
I was actually using a sort of ASP, but a bit different.
Okay.
ASP razors.
Okay, so you're using ASP.NET MVC basically if you're using Razor syntax. And what language was the API? What language was the transfer of data from your application to the API using?
It was C#.
But the actual data itself
Oh yeah, it's excellent.
was XML. Okay. So anybody else worked at all with APIs?
Probably, but
Well, what's the purpose of them? Like in plain everyday English, what's the point of APIs?
Are they reusable interfaces so that you don't have to redo it?
Yep, that's a big part of it.
Same one.
Okay, that it's reusable.
Just a head start.
It's there. Basically, the idea of an API is really what Josh was describing. You have two different applications that need to share data some way, somehow. We don't want to manually have to pay someone to re-enter data in two different applications. We need a simple way to be able to transmit it back and forth. Okay, so last year at the college when we had the big Advancing Learning Conference, we hired a programmer student because what we were doing, people who were registering for the conference at Georgian, we have our own e-commerce system. So people would say, yeah, I want to sign up for the conference. They'd pay online, they'd register, and we'd have all their information in our e-commerce database, which was fine. The problem was we were using this tool as an event scheduling software. So if Buddy signed up for the conference, we then had this software where he could see all of the events and he could sign up. But it had its own separate database. So we already had Buddy's information, his registration in our e-commerce software. We needed to get it in here without having somebody manually re-enter it. So we hired Sukhdeep, who I don't know, some of you might know. You know Sukhdeep. So a big part of his job was to go here and figure out how does their API work. Sorry? Right? Sukhdeep had to go through the documentation, which was here. So here are all the API methods, all of the public methods that their API exposes. One thing to keep in mind, there's no user interface. It's just an exchange of data from one app to another. And this app could be built on anything. I don't even know what technology they've used. So the whole point is we're basically building a bunch of public methods that another application can talk to. So Sukhdeep, the main one he had to deal with was user add, right? When somebody paid and registered in our e-commerce database, he then had to make a call to this URL. So it was, advancinglearning2014.sketch.org. We had to pass in an API key that they gave us, and then pass in all the information about the account, so Buddy would also get an account in this system. Then he could go to our URL, he could see the schedule, and he could register for different events. And all of this was hands-off. So they give us a sample, here's what the URL call would look like, and then you'd get a response back. So there's APIs basically can talk one of two languages. Traditionally, as Josh worked with, XML was the standard. So, an XML response would look something like this. You'd get a response back. If you'd make an API call to get a user list, this is what you'd get back. So it would be that any application could write data to an XML file, or it could read data from an XML file. XML, we've really sort of moved away from that as a standard, although a lot of legacy applications still use it. Here's why. Let's paste that in. So there's our XML document, there's our list of users. What's the new standard? Yeah, so typically now, so an API like this, they actually give you a choice. If you're calling the get users, you can specify the format in the call. I want XML or I want JSON. Okay. Here's the JSON version of the same data. Let's look at these for a second. So there's the data in JSON. There's the data in XML. Why do you suppose JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, it's basically just a JavaScript array. Why do you suppose looking at this has become the standard, and this is becoming less and less frequently used? Brandon?
It looks a hell of a lot cleaner.
Okay. Why? I would agree. What about it is cleaner to you?
Because it's using something that's more standard for programming language rather than something that looks like HTML tags.
Okay, that's one. Josh?
It only specifies the name of the key value field once instead of open. Is that
So what's the benefit of that? So here we've got username and end username, and over here we only have opening username.
It's less data.
Yeah, it's less data, right? So a lower payload. So what is that going to mean for our application? Faster, right? This is a list of 2. If this was a list of 2 million, imagine how much overhead we're saving by removing the closing tags everywhere.
More flexible too for a programming language because it's object.
It's more flexible. It also works great for web-based services because web-based services can easily read JavaScript. We can read it right from the client in the browser because our browsers can all interpret JavaScript and read JavaScript, right? So if we actually do a character count here, so this is the exact same data. Oops. Oh, I'd highlighted that. So we've got 494 characters, and this is just 2 simple records, right? Let's see what it's going to be in XML. In XML, whoops, again, I've 691. So it's a lot bigger. It's like 15% bigger just for 2 records. You extrapolate that and put 2 million records or 200,000 records in that file. One file is going to get transferred and loaded and parsed a heck of a lot faster than the other one. Sorry, Kyle? Yeah, so it's going to be much, much faster. So JSON is the new standard, basically. So originally with .NET, we built what were called web services, and traditionally we used XML. I've built out a number of XML web services over the years. So particularly things like business to business and e-commerce, right? We take orders in with one application. Well, we need to send those orders out to a supplier for manufacturing. We don't want to send them an email and have someone read the email and key in the order into their database. We get an order into our database. It should automatically go out by an API to a supplier who can read that XML or that JSON, and they generate, ship, make and ship the item, right? It's all hands-off is what we want here. So it used to be we used a protocol called SOAP, and SOAP generally uses XML, so we got payloads that looked pretty much like this. You know, I might be describing orders or search results or anything. So SOAP's been replaced. The more common protocol, which probably some of you heard of, is called REST. Does anybody know what REST actually stands for? So REST is representational state transfer, okay? And one of the benefits of REST services is that the method calls usually are familiar, and they tend to look like these. These would be RESTful APIs. You know, so our methods are things like add, get, modify, list, delete. So the method names sort of accurately tend to describe the CRUD operation that they're going to run, really. Okay, and even though this is REST, you know, they still give us the option here for XML or JSON, but as I've said, more and more we're moving away from XML and more web services are using JSON. So the beauty of these is we can build an application, we can build an API in .NET, and we can let other applications that are built on other platforms talk to it and access our data. Either they can query our API and get data back, or we might allow them to send data in, for example. So a third-party application can capture data that we're going to let them add to our database. We don't care whether that application's written in Java, PHP, Node.js, Ruby on Rails, doesn't matter. As long as they can send us a JSON request, we'll send them JSON back, even if our application's built on .NET Framework running C#. So we're going to play around. We're not going to do all of this. There are some really good tutorials here on Microsoft's site. I've been through a lot of these. Most of these are a little too big. They're going to take a little too long for us to work through. Richard, you can go get coffee soon. Promise.
Just finish those tutorials.
That's right. Just finish those tutorials, then you can go get your coffee. Okay. So what I want to do is we'll build it as a separate application. We're going to build a simple API. We'll still work with our Contoso database. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a couple of API methods. So first of all, a user can query our courses table, and get a list of the courses in our database, but we're just gonna send it back in JSON format. Okay? Or, so they could either request all the courses and they'll get everything, or they could pass into the API. It'll be similar to this one. Whoops, so if I go back here. So let's say that, so we'll have a courses get that will run at a URL similar to this, and that'll just return all the courses in JSON format. Something, kind of similar to this. Or we could let them change the URL and rather than specifying a list, they could specify, a single ID, a single course ID, and we'll give them just that one course. Showing it to you at runtime, I kind of built it out already what we're going to be building, just to show you sort of the end product of what this might look like. So I'll go to API. So we want to render back the JSON. So now let's say somebody had a mobile application, right? So we have our list of courses in our university, just like, there's the website ontariocolleges.ca that shows all the courses from every college, right? If they've got a mobile app where you could pick on Contoso and see the list of courses, we can stream that back to that application as JSON. Could be a web application, could be desktop, could be mobile. We don't care. We just say, here's an API, we'll give you our data in JSON, you can take it and do what you want with it. We're just going to build the API part. So we're going to build this, so this will get all, but then we'll also allow, I don't think I built this part out yet, if they pass in a specific ID, we'll send back just that one course. Or we could set it up so that they could send in the ID. We could have two overloaded get methods. They could search by ID, or they could search by course title, or even department. We could have three overloaded methods for this. Okay, so we're just going to stream back the JSON.
So it's possible you could get no results.
Yeah, it's possible they could get no result. So they would just get an empty. We could either handle that with a try catch, or we just send back an empty array. We can also send a response code back. So we could send a 200 for OK, or like a 404 or a 4. We could set our own error to return back, which they could parse. Normally, when you build the API, you also have to spend time documenting it, right? If anyone's going to use the API, you can't just give them the URL. You got to document the methods. Here are the like this is a good example of what that documentation looks like. Here's all the methods, and it shows you what parameters are required and what a sample response looks like. So typically we would include that when we're building the API as well. Okay, so this is what we'll play around with and build. So maybe what we'll do is take a break here. It's 10 after 1. Why don't we take a 20-minute break until 1:30? We come back, we'll build out this API. Shouldn't take that long, and then we'll have a bit of time to do your exam review /lab 5. Okay, so we'll resume at 1:30.